In our lesson 2, part 2 of our lecture for lesson 2, we're going to discuss the presuppositions for biblical theology and hermeneutics. These presuppositions can be studied and looked at in Norman Geisler's Systematic Theology, Volume 1, pages 15 through 205. Let's just begin by enumerating these presuppositions. Number 1, the revelational presupposition. Number 2, the rational presupposition. Number 3, the semantical presupposition. Number 4, the linguistic presupposition. Number 5, the hermeneutical presupposition. Number 6, the historical presupposition. And as we begin, I want to discuss with you why these presuppositions are necessary in the study of hermeneutics. And the best way to explain the relevance of these presuppositions is to talk about the controversy we see today concerning the American Constitution. Our Supreme Court is divided, and this is why the presidential elections are so important, in that some people believe that the Constitution is a dynamic document that changes its meaning as culture changes in the present. So the dynamic view of the Constitution is historically, in the context it was written in, it has no meaning. We reinterpret it now in our situation, and that gives it a new meaning. On the other hand, you have people who view the Constitution as original intent. Most Supreme Court justices believe that we should interpret the Constitution in light of what the authors of the Constitution intended to say. Now, your Supreme Court is basically split half and half between those two issues, and that's why presidential elections are so important, because one side wants to be able to select Supreme Court justices who hold the dynamic view that the historical intent doesn't matter, and others who want to elect Supreme Court justices who hold the historical original intent view. So these presuppositions are at the core of the way we interpret documents. So I'm going to go down these presuppositions with you and at length somewhat describe the differences and the different views of these presuppositions to just get a handle on what we're trying to do in the work of hermeneutics. This kind of study will help you understand better how the secular world many times views the Bible as opposed to how we as Christians tend to view the Bible. The first presupposition that we will look at is the revelational presupposition. According to evangelical theology, God has revealed himself in two ways: natural revelation, special revelation. Natural revelation is the revelation we see in creation. When we look at creation, we can obviously see that something had to begin it. And in in Romans chapter 1, we see there that natural revelation, we see that there's a creator God. But natural revelation doesn't tell us all about God. In fact, natural revelation does tell us there is a God, but not who he is, or not what he's done, or what it means to be saved. In other words, natural revelation, according to Romans chapter 1, 2, and 3, condemns us, but it doesn't save us. We have to have special revelation. And special revelation is the Bible and Christ. So special revelation teaches us who God is. It teaches us who man is, what man's problem is, sin, and those things there. So we have natural and special revelation. So in evangelical theology, we presuppose a natural and special revelation. Now, there are three prerequisites for divine revelation: a being capable of giving revelation. There is a personal being, God, who can. A being capable of receiving propositional revelation from God. That would be us. A medium through which revelation can be given, and we believe there is language, the Bible. We believe there's that medium. So that's a presupposition we hold as evangelical theology. Now, other theologians or other people that do not believe the Bible do not presuppose these things. In fact, they believe that there's a that if there is a God, the deists would believe there is a God, but he can't give revelation to us. So they believe God exists, but they believe he can't speak. That would be Aristotle, and as I said a moment ago, deism. So those are presuppositions that we hold as evangelicals. We believe there is a being capable of giving revelation. We believe God created us capable of receiving propositional revelation. And we believe there's a medium, language, and God's Word. So that's the revelational presupposition that we hold. The second presupposition is the rational presupposition. Logic is the prerequisite for all thinking. In other words, we presuppose reason. Now, we as Christians don't worship reason. In fact, if you worship reason, you lose your mind. In fact, if you worship reason, it becomes irrational. But we do believe in the rational presupposition of logic. Logic is such an inescapable tool that even those who deny it cannot avoid using it, for it is built into the very fabric of the rational universe. In other words, God's created us to think, and God's created us to think logically. In other words, there are subjects and there are objects. In other words, the man ate the apple. The man is the subject, the verb is ate, and the apple is the object. If you presuppose logic, you believe that a man and an apple are two different things. They have objective existence. So God created man. God's the subject, man's the object. So we believe God has an objective existence, and we believe man has an objective existence. That's a logical presupposition that we hold there. Logic is an inescapable tool. Anybody who tries to deny it, and sometimes Buddhism and other belief systems try to deny logic, but the fact of the matter is, if you try to deny logic, you have to assume logic to deny it. In other words, if you're saying logic is irrelevant, you just had to state something propositionally and objectively true about logic, which means you've had to assume logic to actually deny it. So we really can't deny logic, we presuppose it. Now there are three fundamental laws of logic. The law of identity, the law of non-contradiction. Law of identity says A is A. The law of non-contradiction, A is not non-A. The law of the excluded middle, either A or non-A. We assume these laws. In other words, A is A. It's not B. It's not C. 1 is 1. It's not 2. It's not 3. If we didn't assume the law of identity, we couldn't even do mathematics. We couldn't even do our own checkbooks, because if 1 is not 1, then it could be 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if 1 is 2, 3, 4, and 5, then your checkbook could have $1 in it, and it could actually have 2 million. We have to assume logic. So one of the presuppositions we have to do hermeneutics is a logical presupposition. Number 3 is the semantical presupposition. We should presuppose that true statements are meaningful. Now, different philosophers have different ways of approaching this. And just how are true statements meaningful? There are 3 views of how statements are meaningful. Conventionalism teaches us that there are no forms of meaning that transcend time and space. Language has no form or essence. Linguistic meaning is therefore derived from the changing relative experiences on which language is based. Now, here's what conventionalism basically means. Conventionalism says there is absolutely no meaning that transcends our time and space. So therefore, meaning is simply what we, in our context, describes it to be. Now, if that's true, then meaning is relative to whatever we feel like we want it to mean. So therefore, 100 years ago, the word gay meant happy or a good time. 2016, gay means homosexuality. Well, conventionalism simply says that it doesn't matter what it meant in the past. That's a different culture. It doesn't transcend time. But whatever that meaning of gay means is what we mean to say now. So if gay means homosexual now, then when we interpret a text 100 years ago, we just reinterpret that to mean what it says and means now in our culture. In other words, there's no transcendent meaning. There's only conventional meaning, what we say and now. Essentialism, on the other hand, says there's a natural and essential relation between our statements and what they mean. Augustine believed that. The symbols or language are objective, therefore meaning is objective. This makes language the source of objectivity. There's a danger with this meaning. It's a reaction against conventionalism correctly, but the problem with essentialism that we run into is we actually are having to make our very language objective. So, therefore, the language is what drives objectivity, not meaning. There's another approach, the approach that we would hold as evangelicals, called realism. Meaning is objective even though the symbols are relative. Meaning is objective and absolute, not because a given linguistic expression of it is, but because there's an absolute mind, God. In other words, there is an objective meaning. We may use different words, but the meaning can be the same because there is an objective meaning. So the symbols may vary, in other words, in different languages. In other words, A, B, C, D in the English language. In Greek, it's alpha, beta, gamma, delta. In Hebrew, it's aleph, bet, gimel, dalet. There's different symbols. They're not absolute. We can use different symbols, but meaning is the same. It's absolute. And that would be a realism approach to presupposition. But you can see how if a person holds conventionalism, then the Bible can mean anything that we want it to say. In other words, whatever meaning we put on a word now, we can put on a word that was used 2,000 years ago. So therefore, meaning 2,000 years ago is irrelevant. What meaning we put on it now. Now, you can see how a lot of people actually approach the Bible that way, so therefore it can mean anything we want it to say. The linguistic presupposition is a lot like the semantical presupposition. Evangelicals believe the Bible is God's word in human words. Therefore, another precondition for doing evangelical theology is the belief that finite human language is capable of meaningful expressing the nature of the infinite God of Christian theism, which is displayed in both general and special revelation. There are three linguistic alternatives. One is called equivocal. Equivocal means language is totally different from the way God actually is. In other words, our language cannot describe how God is at all. Now again, deism would hold that view. In other words, we can't talk about God because we can't explain anything about Him. Now if that's true, then anything we say down here about God can't be true. It's just our convention, as we talked about a moment ago. Univocal says that language is totally the same as God actually is. Some evangelicals would hold that, but we do understand the linguistic problem and the problem of semantics there. Sometimes we're using words and symbols, and they may not mean the same thing. So the other approach is the analogous view. Language is similar to the way God is. In other words, we can't exactly exhaust God, but we can say things about Him that show us what He's like. So most theologians are either univocal or analogous, and we view language. And again, the reason this is important to hermeneutics is because hermeneutics is the study of the language or the Bible as God's expressed Himself through language. So we have a presupposition on the way we view language. We actually believe that language can tell us true things about God, and that God is not so totally different that we can't describe Him. Now, we can't exhaust God with language, but we can describe things about God. Again, the hermeneutical presupposition is the other presupposition, and that's the issue of subjectivity versus objectivity. Subjectivity in hermeneutics says that the Bible or written documents about God are just subjective. It's just simply what we say it is, just like conventionalism there. Martin Heidegger in 1889 and 1976 denied there was an objective meaning at all. In other words, the Bible had no objective meaning. In other words, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The Bible doesn't mean that because that's the language describing something objective about God, and according to these philosophers, we can't know anything objectively about God. We can only know what we say subjectively. You have Derrida there, deconstructionism. All meaning is limited by language. It's conventional. Rudolf Bultmann says that the Bible is nothing but myth language. That we can't use the Bible to say anything about God, so we have to demythologize the Bible. On the other hand, objectivity in hermeneutics says that there is an objective meaning. That although the Bible was written 4,000 or 5,000 years ago in Genesis chapter 1, but when Genesis 1 says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, that's what it means. It has an objective meaning. Now, the basis for objectivity is there's existence of an absolute mind. In other words, we believe there's a God that has an absolute mind. His mind's objective, and we have a mind of our own. We presuppose the absolute nature of meaning. We believe meaning has an absolute nature. We believe that there's an analogy between infinite understanding and finite understanding. In other words, while we're finite and God's infinite, we can have a link between those. God created us to think about Him. We also believe the ability of finite minds made in God's image to understand and reveal truth. So to do hermeneutics, we have these 4 bases for doing hermeneutics. Again, we presuppose objectivity and subjectivity as it relates to history. There's a historical presupposition. In other words, we believe that history can be studied objectively. See, so those deconstructionist philosophers believe that there's no objectivity in the past. We can't know anything in the past. We can only know what's now. There are several objections to objectivity in historical documents. Number one, history is unobservable. Since you can't observe it, then you can't know anything objectively about history. Well, just because we can't observe history doesn't mean we can't know something about history. We do know things about history. Some people say that the axiological objection, value judgments cloud our knowledge of the past. We have values now, and it clouds us. Now, we do believe we have values, and those values cloud us, but that doesn't mean we can't know anything objectively about history. Because if we can't, then the study of history is useless. There are methodological objections. In other words, this objection says that there's a selective nature in how we do history, and there is, but that still doesn't mean we can't study history. Metaphysical objections to history are often stated. We structure the facts of history around our worldview, and we view history through our worldview, and that is true, but again, that still doesn't mean we can't know history objectively. A psychological objection. Some people believe that our passion obscures us viewing historical objectivity. Again, we do believe our passion does involve the way we look at history. But again, we still believe that we can have an objective view of history, that we can study historical documents and find out what they said objectively. Then we've already discussed the hermeneutical objection, deconstruction of subjective language. In other words, this objection says that the language in the past is subjective and our language is subjective, and we can't know. We've already discussed that one. There are some general conclusions concerning objectivity. Absolute objectivity is possible only for an infinite mind. We do believe that absolute objectivity can only be known by God. Number two, even without the absolute perspective, an objective finite interpretation is possible. We as Christians believe that while we're not infinite, we can know and have been created to know and study past events objectively. Neither the scientist nor the historian can obtain objective meaning without some worldview. Everybody has a worldview. This doesn't mean we can't know objectivity. In fact, we can.